Let me sit you down and walk you through this slowly, gently, and clearly, just the way our mature, wise audience prefers it. Now picture someone stepping forward with a warm greeting, not rushed, not cluttered, just steady. Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well today. That kind of greeting sets the stage for calm, easy listening, especially for folks who don't care for the loud noise or drama that younger crowds sometimes chase. But as soon as the greeting settles, we ease into something more serious. Because what's happening behind those federal walls isn't simply gossip. It's a story about behavior, ego, consequences, and the way a person can fool themselves into thinking they're still in complete control, even when every sign in life is telling them their world has changed. The situation here centers on a man who, even behind bars, walks around acting as though he still has the same power, the same influence, and the same command over everyone and everything. It's almost like he's trying to recreate his old life inside a place that was designed specifically to strip away that sense of power. The heart of the story is simple. Some people learn humility when circumstances force them to, and others double down on the attitude that got them into trouble in the first place. It begins with a few small reports. Alcohol found where it shouldn't be, phone calls made in ways the facility does not permit, and conversations involving people who shouldn't have been connected on the same call. Now, for older viewers who have lived long enough to witness the patterns of human behavior, this won't come as a surprise. When someone is used to getting their way for decades, they don't simply change their habits the moment they walk into a concrete building. Instead, they try to shape their new surroundings to fit their old habits. And that seems to be this man's biggest issue. He is behaving as though his new environment is just an extension of his old life. But the facility watching him doesn't operate on privilege or ego. When you step through those gates, your world shrinks. Your choices shrink. Your freedom shrinks. And the idea that you can run things the way you used to becomes nothing more than a stubborn illusion. Reports say he has allegedly found ways to obtain devices he shouldn't have access to, allowing him to monitor his business from behind those walls. That's not something your average person in prison can pull off. Not unless they have help, not unless someone on the inside is impressed enough, or compensated enough, to bend the rules. Now, we're not pointing fingers, and we're not claiming anything illegal has happened. We're only describing what the talk has been. Whispers of favors, whispers of connections, whispers of staff members who may be a little too willing to overlook things. But the truth about jail, as anyone 65 and older knows very well, is that nothing stays hidden forever. Someone is always watching. Someone is always listening. And no matter how charming or powerful someone believes they are, nobody is more powerful than the system that holds the keys to the door. The more worrying part isn't even the devices or the calls. It's the attitude behind everything. People inside the facility say he has laughed when warned by officials, as if rules simply don't apply to him. Think about that. Imagine someone looking directly at the people who are responsible for their supervision and essentially telling them, with their attitude, if not their words, that they don't take the situation seriously. For older listeners, this might remind you of someone who has lived their whole life without ever hearing no. It doesn't matter how many warnings come. The person seems to believe they are immune to consequences. But behind those thick walls, there is no immunity. There is only time, structure, and the steady eyes of people who enforce rules for a living. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. People who pretend to be someone's allies inside prison often have their own goals, their own hopes, and their own plans. Many inmates are trying to earn special privileges or shorten their sentences. So if they see someone acting boldly, maybe even recklessly, they might decide to share those details with the right officials. Not out of loyalty, but out of self-interest. Older adults understand this deeply. Survival makes people act in ways they never imagined. And if giving information about someone gets them closer to their families, their freedom, or their peace of mind, then that's exactly what many will do. So while he might think people are following him out of admiration or fear, the truth is that many might simply be collecting information like crumbs leading to their own freedom. This brings us to his so-called job promotion inside the facility. He started in a laundry room, which is where many newcomers begin. But soon enough, according to reports, he moved into a far more comfortable role, assistant to the chaplain. This position involves a private space, access to air conditioning, and even the privilege of working around food brought in for religious gatherings. Now, for a man who has always lived with comfort and luxury, this might feel like reclaiming a piece of the life he lost. But to outsiders looking in, this sudden leap raises eyebrows. Promotions don't just fall into someone's lap unless there's either exceptional behavior or exceptional influence behind the scenes. And if influence is playing a role, then that is exactly the type of thing government officials monitor closely. They don't take lightly to inmates building networks inside the facility, especially not ones involving favors, special treatment, or influence over other inmates' schedules. And here's where the lesson becomes clear, especially for an older audience that values wisdom and foresight. Pride always comes before a fall. If someone walks into prison and immediately starts building a little kingdom for themselves, the people observing won't simply sit back. They'll make notes, they'll connect the dots, and they'll quietly watch everything until they have enough reason to step in. The man might believe he is still in control, still calling the shots, still stacking favors, and still demanding respect. But that's not how this story is unfolding. He is being watched, and his every move is being evaluated. Now, you and I both know, no matter how stubborn someone is, no matter how much they want to cling to their old life, prison has a way of stripping people down to the truth. It forces a person to look inward. It forces them to confront themselves. But in his case, instead of humbling himself, he seems to be leaning deeper into the habits that caused detention in the first place. And that's why so many people are saying his situation could get worse. When you ignore warnings, when you assume you're untouchable, when you behave like the rules don't apply, then eventually consequences arrive. They always do. And older viewers understand this lesson better than anyone. Life has a way of teaching humility, one way or another. Now let us continue unfolding this story calmly, carefully, and with the kind of detail that respects the intelligence and life experience of older listeners. Because when we look at what's happening inside those walls, it becomes clear that this isn't merely about one person breaking small rules. It is about a deeper pattern, one shaped by pride, entitlement, and a lifetime of believing consequences are something that happened to other people. As we move forward in the story, imagine you are watching a man who is still holding tightly onto an identity that no longer serves him. He walks through the facility with the same posture, the same elevated chin, the same sense of superiority he had outside. Yet what he fails to understand is that the system he is now in doesn't bend for ego. It doesn't respond to charm. It doesn't adjust itself to make him feel important. The place he's in was built to remove illusions, not support them. Even so, he appears determined to keep those illusions alive. People inside say he treats his surroundings like a temporary inconvenience rather than a life-changing shift. He talks, moves, and acts as though the walls are simply holding his body, but not his mind, not his habits, not his influence. And this is where the trouble truly begins. Because when someone refuses to recognize where they are, their decisions become dangerous. They stop thinking clearly. They begin to see rules as obstacles rather than responsibilities. And they begin to test the limits. Not just once, but again and again. Older viewers understand this well. A person who refuses to adapt becomes their own worst enemy. As word spreads through the facility, more people begin observing him closely. Not because they admire him, but because they are curious. They want to know how far he will push the boundaries, how much he will try to manipulate his environment, and whether his attempts at influence will succeed. In a place where routine is strict and life is contained in rows of cells, any unusual movement becomes a spark of interest. People whisper, people watch, and most importantly, people report. That is the part he seems to forget. Inside a facility, every action is watched by dozens of eyes, some belonging to staff, others belonging to inmates who would do anything for a chance at freedom. If they see someone breaking rules, they know they can use that information to bargain. And older adults understand deeply that when pressure is high, even the closest so-called friends can turn into informants. The chaplain's assistant position is one of the most interesting developments in this story. For someone like him, moving into such a role might feel like restoring a piece of lost status. The job includes a cooler room, access to supplies, and the ability to move around freely in ways others cannot. To him, it probably feels like reclaiming power. But from the outside looking in, this sudden rise looks suspicious. Promotions in prison don't happen by accident. They don't happen because someone has a famous name. They happen because someone has influence, or someone is using influence to push things along behind the scenes. For older listeners who have decades of wisdom, this is where the red flags begin waving. Because whenever someone's status changes too quickly in a tightly controlled environment, it signals one of two things: manipulation or favoritism. And both are dangerous. In his case, All these little puzzle pieces begin fitting together into a larger picture. One that suggests he is trying to build a small system of control within the walls. Not control over the entire facility, but control over his immediate surroundings. Control over who comes into the chapel room. Control over which inmates' names get placed on certain lists. Control over what favors are granted. And control is something he has always craved, even outside those walls. Now, here's the part older listeners truly understand. Control always comes with a cost. Whether in families, workplaces, or communities, the moment you begin trying to run things that aren't yours to run, you create enemies. You attract attention. You invite consequences. And when you do that inside a facility where every rule exists for a reason, you place a target on your own back. Staff start watching more closely. Higher authorities begin asking questions. And those who appear to be helping you may suddenly distance themselves the moment trouble arises. But the deeper danger lies in the very people he thinks are admiring him. Because many of them are not fans. Many of them are not loyal. Many of them are simply using him, watching him, listening to him, waiting for him to slip up. If they can take what he says, pass it to the right person, and get a reduction in their sentence, why wouldn't they? Older viewers understand this truth better than anyone. Desperation changes loyalty. A man may sit beside you, eat with you, laugh with you, and still be ready to give your name to authorities if it buys him freedom. And that's exactly what seems to be happening. The moment reports about unauthorized drinks, improper phone calls, and suspicious devices surfaced, the question became, not how did they find out, but who told? Because inside a facility like this, nothing stays hidden. If someone wants alcohol, someone must smuggle it. If someone makes a forbidden call, someone hears the echo of that call. If someone holds a device they shouldn't have, someone sees the glow of the screen. Information doesn't disappear. It hangs in the air like a scent that eventually leads straight to the source. Meanwhile, he continues to behave with the same arrogance he had outside, laughing off warnings, acting above rules, and carrying himself like the environment exists for his convenience. That's the kind of behavior that invites consequences. Older adults know this well. Life doesn't reward people who refuse to change. Life teaches lessons in its own time and its own way. And the lesson here is building slowly, steadily, almost silently. Let's talk about the part that truly concerns the people watching him. The pattern. Over the years, he has developed a way of moving through the world that makes him believe he is untouchable. He thinks people will always bend for him. He believes rules can always be softened, broken, or replaced if he pushes hard enough. This is a belief that might have worked for him for many years outside. But now, inside a place designed to strip away entitlement, it becomes a dangerous delusion. Because the more he tries to maintain control, the more evidence he creates. The more evidence he creates, the more eyes follow him. And the more eyes follow him, the harder it becomes for him to hide anything. Now here's something older audiences understand better than anyone. Quiet consequences are the ones that hit the hardest. The system doesn't always react immediately. It waits. It observes. It collects. And at the right moment, it moves in a way that leaves no room for excuses. The man may think the warnings he receives are harmless or meaningless, or simply part of a routine conversation. But they are not. They are signals. Gentle taps on the door, letting him know he is being watched. If he ignores those taps, the knock will eventually get louder. And if he ignores the knock, the door will eventually open. That is how consequences operate in a system built to maintain order. And this leads us to a deeper truth. Humility is not a weakness. It is a survival skill, especially in a place where pride can destroy you. If he were willing to sit quietly, follow the rules, keep his head down, and respect the environment he is in, his time there would be simple. Difficult, yes, but predictable. But humility is something he has never practiced, and that absence is catching up with him. Older listeners know this deeply. If someone refuses to humble themselves, life will humble them on its own terms. This pattern is why so many people believe more discipline may come his way. Not because officials are targeting him unfairly, and not because inmates dislike him personally, but because he refuses to step out of the role he once played. And when someone refuses to adapt, the system adapts for them. The question now isn't whether he will face consequences, it's when. Because he is not just breaking rules. He is building a trail. And every trail leads somewhere.